The sun rose slowly over the sweeping fields of Heartland, painting the sky with hues of amber and rose. A soft breeze carried the scent of hay and morning dew, rustling the leaves of the old trees that had stood witness to countless memories. Amy Fleming stood quietly near the barn, her gaze fixed on Lindy, as she giggled and ran alongside the horses free, fearless and full of life. For a brief moment, it felt like time stood still. But beneath the beauty of the morning, something stirred in Amy's heart. A gentle ache, a quiet knowing. Life at the ranch had continued. Seasons had changed, and people had moved forward, but not every scar fades with time. Ty's absence was like a shadow that never truly left. His spirit echoed in the rhythm of the galloping hooves, in the way the sunlight hit the hills, and most of all, in Lindy's eyes, so deep and familiar, they almost stopped Amy's breath. It was a new day, but not without the weight of yesterday. Something was changing, and Amy could feel it. Deep down, she knew Heartland was about to face a chapter unlike any before. Lou arrived shortly after, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Handing one to Amy, she leaned against the fence and watched Lindy with a soft smile. "She's growing up so fast," Lou said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "I can't believe she's already asking about riding solo." Amy chuckled, but there was a hint of sadness in her expression. "She's just like him," she admitted. "Fearless, determined. So much of Ty is in her." Lou hesitated before speaking again, sensing the emotions beneath Amy's words. "And Nathan?" she asked cautiously. "Have you talked to him about the future?" Amy sighed, the warmth of her coffee doing little to soothe the cold uncertainty that lingered in her chest. She stared out over the paddock, watching Lindy in the distance, her laughter dancing through the crisp morning air. Nathan had been nothing but patient, kind, understanding, the kind of man who didn't just step into her life, but stood beside her through the storm. He had offered her stability, gentle companionship, and a chance to start over. And yet, something invisible but powerful kept her from fully letting go. She had tried to envision a future with him. A quiet, peaceful life where Lindy had a father figure and where she could finally breathe without pain. On the surface, it made sense. But love, Amy knew, had never been about logic. Her heart still bore the imprints of a love lost too soon. A love that never truly faded. And no matter how hard she tried to silence it, a part of her still whispered his name in the quiet moments. Before she could even begin to make sense of her feelings, the low rumble of an engine pulled her attention toward the driveway. A cloud of dust rose as a truck rolled in, the sound slicing through the peaceful morning. Jack emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag, his brow furrowed as he squinted at the unfamiliar vehicle. The horses grew restless. The birds fell silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Amy stood frozen, mug clutched tightly in her hand, her heartbeat quickening without reason. There was something in the air she couldn't explain. A shift, a pull, the feeling that everything was about to change. Then the truck door creaked open, and in that single moment, the world stood still. The sounds of the ranch disappeared, swallowed by a sudden, deafening silence. Dust swirled around the figure stepping out, his posture deliberate, his silhouette strikingly familiar, too familiar. Amy's breath hitched, her body locked in place as her eyes tried to make sense of what they were seeing. Her hands began to tremble. The coffee slipped from her fingers and crashed to the ground. No, it couldn't be. But it was. And as he took another step forward, Amy's entire world tilted because the impossible had just become real. Ty Borden stood before her alive. Jack's face drained of color, his usual unshakable calm shattering as his eyes locked onto the man stepping out of the truck. His hands, calloused from decades of ranch work, clenched involuntarily at his sides. Lou let out a strangled gasp, her hand flying to her mouth as disbelief swept across her face. Every thought, every word vanished from her mind. Lindy, too young to understand the weight of what was happening, tilted her head in curiosity, her innocent gaze fixed on the stranger. Everyone else seemed frozen by. But Amy couldn't breathe. Her world shifted in an instant. The sounds of the ranch, the chirping birds, the creaking barn door, the distant whinny of a horse, all faded into a haunting silence. She stared at the figure before her heart crashing against her ribcage like a wild storm. For years, she had mourned. She had wept under starlit skies and whispered goodbyes to the wind. She had forced herself to move forward, to be strong for Lindy, to believe in a life without Ty. But now, he was here, standing in front of her, older, weathered, but unmistakably him. Ty, his presence struck like lightning, raw, sudden, impossible. Her mind screamed that it couldn't be, but her soul knew. The space between them felt endless and impossibly close. Time bent around the gravity of this moment. Ty's eyes, once so full of dreams, now carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken regrets. There was longing in them, guilt, a haunted kind of love that had never really left. He opened his mouth to speak, his voice caught by the emotions swelling in his throat. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, barely more than a whisper, the words escaped, "Amy, I'm home." The sentence landed like a thunderclap. Amy's body stiffened, her breath sharp and shallow. Home. That word, a sanctuary once filled with laughter and love, now sounded foreign. Wounded, almost cruel. Her eyes burned, but no tears came. Her emotions collided inside her like a storm. Anger, sorrow, confusion, and that stubborn flicker of love that refused to die, no matter how much time had passed. She shook her head slowly, voice trembling but fierce. "No," she whispered, barely trusting herself to speak. "No, you don't get to say that." Her eyes locked onto his, steel beneath the pain. "You don't get to walk back into our lives like nothing happened. You don't get to tear open wounds we've spent years trying to heal." The silence that followed was deafening. Ty stood frozen, the weight of her words hitting harder than anything he had prepared for. And somewhere in the distance, the wind picked up again, carrying with it the beginning of a reckoning that would change everything. Ty swallowed hard, his jaw tightening. "Amy, where were you?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Where were you all these years, Ty? Do you have any idea what you put us through?" Her eyes burned with unshed tears, the weight of every lonely night, every moment of heartbreak crashing over her. "Lindy grew up without you. I mourned you. I tried to move on. And now you just show up?" Jack finally stepped forward, his voice rough with restrained emotion. "You better have a damn good explanation, son." Ty looked at them all, Jack, Lou, and finally Amy. His eyes landed on Lindy, who was watching him with wide, innocent eyes. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I never wanted to leave, but I didn't have a choice." Amy shook her head, turning away, her hands gripping the fence as she tried to steady herself. Lou was the first to break the silence. "That's not good enough, Ty. You were presumed dead. We buried you in our hearts. Do you have any idea what that did to us?" "I know," Ty said, his voice filled with regret. "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." Amy turned back, her blue eyes filled with a storm of emotions. "You can't just expect us to forgive you," she whispered. "I don't," Ty admitted. "But I need you to know the truth." Lindy finally spoke, her voice small but clear. "Are you my dad?" Ty's breath hitched, his eyes softening as he crouched to her level. "Yeah," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm your dad." Lindy studied him for a long moment, then looked up at Amy, as if waiting for her approval. Amy felt her heart shatter into a million pieces. This was the moment she had both feared and longed for, the day Lindy would meet her father. Jack exhaled deeply. "I think we all need answers." Ty nodded, his face grim. "I'll tell you everything. But it's not what you think." Amy's heart hammered in her chest, each beat louder than the last. For years, she had convinced herself she knew the truth. She had built her world around that certainty, grief, anger, and the long, silent acceptance that Ty was gone. But now, as she stood there, staring into his eyes, those eyes that had once been her anchor, everything she thought she knew unraveled in an instant. The emotions swirling inside her were too complex to name, and the confusion was unbearable. Whatever had happened to him, whatever had kept him away all these years, it was far more intricate, more painful, more tangled than she could ever have imagined. And in that one moment, Amy realized with a sharp, sinking clarity, this was going to change everything. The air was thick with silence, oppressive and suffocating, as the weight of Ty's return settled over Heartland like a storm cloud. The wind whispered through the trees, a mournful sound that seemed to carry the tension of the moment, while the horses in the distance shifted nervously, as though they too sensed the chaos approaching. The earth beneath Amy's feet felt unsteady, as if the very land was trembling in anticipation of what would come next. Amy stood frozen, her body rigid with a mixture of shock and disbelief. She crossed her arms tightly over her chest, as though trying to hold herself together to keep herself from falling apart. Her pulse raced, her breath shallow. She had spent so many sleepless nights imagining the moment she would see Ty again, scenarios filled with bittersweet reunions, visions of the man she had loved so deeply, and the pain of losing him all over again. Some of those dreams had been filled with hope, others with nightmares. But none of them had prepared her for the reality of this moment of him, standing there in front of her, so real, so undeniably present, yet so impossible to understand. The world felt like it had shifted on its axis. The past and the present collided, and Amy could do nothing but stand there, caught in the middle of it all, unsure whether to embrace him or run away. Jack was the first to break the silence. His voice, usually so calm and steady, held an edge of restrained emotion. "Start talking, Ty. Now." Ty took a deep breath, his hands clenched at his sides. His gaze flickered to Lindy, who stood beside Amy, staring at him with a mix of curiosity and confusion. She looked so much like him. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He had missed years of her life. "I know I owe you all an explanation," he said finally, his voice low and rough. "But I need you to believe me when I say I never meant to leave." Amy let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "That's not good enough, Ty. That's not even close to good enough." Lou, who had been standing beside Jack with her arms folded, finally spoke. "Ty, you were declared dead. We grieved for you." Amy had to pick up the pieces of her life, and Lindy had to grow up without a father. "And now, after all these years, you just show up and expect us to listen?" Ty's jaw tightened. "I don't expect anything. But if you let me explain, maybe you'll understand." Amy's breath was shaky, but she nodded. "Fine. Explain." Ty glanced at Jack, then back at Amy. "After the shooting, I woke up in a hospital, but I wasn't in Hudson." His voice was steady, but the pain in his eyes was unmistakable. "I was taken somewhere else. Somewhere off the grid. I don't remember much from those first few days, just pain, confusion, and then nothing. When I finally came to, I was told I couldn't go back. That it wasn't safe." Amy frowned. "Safe from what?" Ty hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. "There were people who didn't want me to survive that day. And if they knew I was alive, they would have come after me and after you." Amy's blood ran cold. Are you saying someone tried to kill you? Ty exhaled slowly. I don't know exactly who was behind it, but I do know that if I had come back, I would have put you and Lindy in danger. So I stayed away. Jack's fists tightened at his sides. You expect us to believe that? Ty met Jack's gaze, his voice filled with quiet desperation. I had no choice. The only way to keep Amy and Lindy safe was to disappear. Amy's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to scream, to tell him he was lying, that nothing could justify the years of pain and loss. But something in his eyes, something raw and broken, made her hesitate. Could it be true? Had he really stayed away to protect them? Lindy, who had been silently absorbing everything, finally spoke. You're my dad? Her voice was small, hesitant, but it shattered the tension in an instant. Ty crouched down to her level, his voice thick with emotion. Yeah, sweetheart, I'm your dad. Lindy studied him for a long moment, her little brows furrowed. Then, to everyone's shock, she took a small step forward and touched his face. You don't look like the pictures. A choked laugh escaped Ty, his eyes glistening. I know. It's been a long time. Amy turned away, her emotions threatening to consume her. This was too much. Just hours ago, she had been thinking about her future with Nathan, trying to move forward. And now Ty was here alive, standing in front of her, telling her that everything she had believed was a lie. Nathan. The thought hit her like a wave of guilt. He had been patient, kind, understanding. He had been the one helping her heal, the one who had been there for Lindy when she needed a father figure. And now, just as she was about to take the next step with him, Ty had returned. Lou, sensing Amy's turmoil, spoke again. Ty, even if what you're saying it is true doesn't change the fact that Amy and Lindy had to live without you. That pain doesn't just go away. Ty stood up, his gaze locked on Amy. I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me, Amy, but I need you to know I never stopped loving you. Not for a second. Amy's breath hitched. She wanted to believe him, but love wasn't enough. Not anymore. Jack finally sighed, running a hand over his face. You're staying in the guest cabin tonight. Amy swallowed hard and nodded. She couldn't process this right now. She needed space. Ty turned to her, his voice soft. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. Amy met his gaze, her heart aching. I don't know if you can. As she walked away, Lindy glanced back at Ty one last time before following her mother. And Ty, he stood there, watching them go, knowing this was only the beginning of the hardest battle of his life, the fight to earn back the trust of the family he had lost. The night was long and sleepless for Amy. Every time she closed her eyes, memories of Ty flooded her mind, his laughter, his touch, the way he used to look at her like she was his entire world. And now, after all these years, he was back, alive. But the man standing before her wasn't the same person she had lost. He was different, changed, and she wasn't sure if she could ever trust him again. The early morning sun cast a golden glow over Heartland as Amy stepped onto the porch, a cup of coffee warming her hands. From a distance, she spotted Ty near the guest cabin, sitting on the steps, staring out at the vast landscape. He looked like a man haunted by his past, by the choice he had made. Jack joined Amy, his expression unreadable. Couldn't sleep? Amy shook her head. Every time I close my eyes, I hear his voice. I see him. And I don't know if it's real or if it's just my heart playing tricks on me. Jack sighed, rubbing his hands together. I don't trust him yet, Amy. But I know one thing: you deserve answers. And so does Lindy. Amy tightened her grip on her cup. Lindy, she doesn't understand what's happening. She's just a little girl, Jack. How do I even begin to explain this to her? Jack placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You tell her the truth. That's all you can do. Amy exhaled slowly before making her way toward Ty. As she approached, he looked up, his face tired but hopeful. I didn't think you'd want to talk to me, Ty said, standing up. Amy kept a safe distance, her voice firm. I don't know what I want, Ty. But I do know that Lindy deserves the truth. And so do I. Ty nodded, his gaze searching hers. Ask me anything. I won't hide anything from you. Amy hesitated, then took a deep breath. You said you stayed away to protect us. But how do I know that's the truth? How do I know you didn't just give up on us? Pain flashed across Ty's face. I never gave up on you, Amy. Not for a single second. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his posture. I wanted to come back every day. I fought to find a way. But the people who did this to me, they made sure I couldn't. Amy crossed her arms. Who are they, Ty? Who did this to you? Ty's jaw clenched. I don't know their names, but I know they were connected to the shooting. The people who tried to kill me that day weren't just random criminals. There was something bigger at play. Amy felt a chill run down her spine. Bigger? Like what? Ty hesitated before answering. I think it had to do with the land dispute. The one that almost cost you and Jack the ranch. Amy's heart pounded. That dispute had nearly torn their family apart. But could it really be connected to what had happened to Ty? Before she could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps caught their attention. Nathan. Amy turned to see him standing a few feet away, his expression unreadable. His presence alone made her chest tighten. He had been her rock, the man she had slowly begun to trust, the one who had helped her move forward. And now, everything was unraveling. Amy, Nathan said, his voice calm but firm. Can we talk? Ty straightened, his protective instincts flaring. I think Amy and I were in the middle of something. Nathan's eyes met Ty's, and the tension between them was palpable. I understand that you have unfinished business here. But Amy isn't the only one who has been affected by your disappearance. Amy stepped between them, holding up a hand. Stop. Both of you. She turned to Nathan. What is it, Nathan? Exhaled. I need to know where we stand, Amy. Before all of this happened, we were planning a future together. I was ready to take the next step, and now, everything has changed. Amy's throat tightened. Nathan had been nothing but patient and understanding. But how could she give him an answer when her entire world had just been turned upside down? I don't know, Nathan, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what's right anymore. Nathan's expression softened, but there was pain in his eyes. I love you, Amy, but I won't compete with a ghost. Ty's fists clenched at his sides. I'm not a ghost. Nathan's gaze didn't waver. You were, for a long time. Amy felt the weight of their emotions crashing down on her. She'd spent so long learning to live without Ty, to accept that he was gone. And now she was being asked to choose between the love she had lost and the love she had started to build. Before she could respond, Lindy's small voice cut through the tension. Mommy? Amy turned to see Lindy standing in the doorway, her eyes wide and uncertain. Nathan took a step back. I should go. Amy nodded, silently thanking him for understanding. She crouched down to Lindy's level, brushing a strand of hair from her face. What is it, sweetheart? Lindy glanced at Ty before looking back at her mother. Can I? Can I talk to him? Amy's breath hitched. She looked at Ty, whose eyes were filled with emotion. Of course, sweetheart, Amy said softly, stepping aside. Ty knelt down, his voice gentle. Hey, Lindy. Lindy hesitated before stepping closer. Did you really love Mommy? Ty's eyes glistened. More than anything in this world. Lindy bit her lip. Then why did you leave? Ty's throat tightened as he fought to keep his composure, his voice thick with regret and something deeper, something that felt like the weight of years spent in silence. He had lived with this truth for far too long, but now, standing here, it felt like the words might never be enough. Because I thought I was keeping you both safe. But I was wrong. Lindy, her small figure standing like an anchor in this storm of emotions, studied him with a depth that belied her age. There was no judgment in her eyes, only quiet curiosity and perhaps just a flicker of hope. Slowly, she took a tentative step forward, her gaze never leaving his. To everyone's shock, she reached out and touched his hand, the gesture simple, yet loaded with meaning. "Are you going to leave again?" Her voice was soft, vulnerable. Ty's heart broke at the question. He shook his head slowly, the ache in his chest growing as he looked down at the child he had abandoned. His voice cracked as he spoke, the words barely escaping through the weight of his emotions. "No, sweetheart. I'm here to stay." Amy stood at the edge of the moment, watching the exchange with a quiet intensity that matched the turmoil raging inside her. She wanted so desperately to believe him. She wanted to believe in the man who had once been her everything. She wanted to believe they could rebuild, heal the wounds, restore the family they once had. But deep down she knew, with a certainty that shook her to the core, nothing would ever be the same again. The weight of Ty's return hung over Heartland like a dark, brooding storm cloud, shifting the atmosphere, changing everything. The ranch, once a place of solace and routine, now felt charged with tension. Amy felt the delicate balance of her life teetering, caught between the life she had fought so hard to build and the life that had been ripped away from her. There were no easy answers, no clear paths forward, only the echoes of the past and the uncertainty of the future, pulling her in two directions. Ty had promised Lindy he was staying. But promises, Amy knew all too well, were fragile things. Words were only that, words. Trust, however, was built over time. It had to be earned. And Ty had lost her trust long ago. The morning air was crisp, the sky clear as Amy guided Spartan through the pasture. The familiar rhythm of working with the horses helped clear her mind, a momentary escape from the chaos within. But even as she moved, she could feel Ty's presence like a shadow. She didn't need to look up to know he was standing by the fence, watching her. His gaze was as intense as it had always been, quiet, steady, and, despite the years, still capable of making her heart race. But now, instead of that warmth, all she felt was the ache of what could never be again. "You still ride like it's the only place you feel free." His voice cut through the stillness, low and filled with a deep, unspoken longing. Amy didn't turn to face him. She couldn't. "Maybe because it is," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The silence between them stretched long and heavy, neither of them willing to break it. Finally, Ty spoke again, his voice quieter this time, as if he were afraid to disturb the fragile peace. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, Amy. I know I broke you." Amy closed her eyes, fighting to swallow the lump in her throat. She knew he was right. She had been broken. But it hadn't just been her. It wasn't just me you broke, Ty. It was Lindy. It was my family. It was everything. The words were harder than she expected, cutting through her like shards of glass. The hurt ran so deep, so wide. Ty took a step closer, his gaze never leaving her, the weight of his regret pressing down on them both. "I want to fix it. I don't know how, but I need to try." Amy turned to face him then, her eyes blazing with the pain of everything she had carried alone for so long. For the first time, Ty saw the full depth of her hurt. "And what if I don't want you to?" The words hit him like a physical blow, each one more excruciating than the last. He had expected anger. He had expected resentment. But this This was different. To hear her doubt whether she even wanted him back, whether they could ever be them again, that was a pain he hadn't anticipated. Before he could respond, the sound of a truck engine pulling up the driveway broke the moment, sharp and sudden. Amy's heart clenched in her chest when she saw Nathan step out, his figure framed by the truck's headlights. Nathan, always steady, always there. And now, as he walked toward her, Amy realized just how much she had come to depend on the stability he offered. Nathan's gaze flicked briefly to Ty, but his focus remained on Amy, the quiet determination in his step matching the weight of his words. "I need to talk to you," Nathan said, his voice steady, but with a trace of concern. Ty clenched his jaw, his muscles taut with the tension of the moment. He took a step back, offering a curt nod. "I'll give you space." As Ty moved away, Amy turned back to Nathan, already knowing the difficult conversation that awaited her. "I don't want to push you," Nathan began, his voice calm but heavy with an undercurrent of emotion. "I know this is impossible for you, but I also need to know where we stand." Amy let out a long sigh, the weight of his words settling in. She didn't have an answer, not for him, not for herself. "Nathan, I don't have an answer for you," she said quietly, her gaze falling to the ground, as though the earth might swallow her whole. "Everything in my life just turned upside down. I don't know what's right anymore." Nathan's expression softened, but there was a quiet sadness in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. "I love you, Amy, and I've been willing to wait. But I can't be the second choice." His words hung in the air between them, a silent plea that cut deeper than any confession of love. Amy felt a pang of guilt twist her insides, but the reality was undeniable. No matter how much she cared for Nathan, the past had a way of clawing its way back uninvited, unforgiving. Amy's chest tightened. "You were never the second choice." Nathan let out a heavy breath. "Then tell me, if Ty hadn't come back, would we still be standing here, having this conversation?" Amy had no answer, and that silence told Nathan everything he needed to know. After a moment, he nodded. "I don't want to make this harder for you, but I can't stay in limbo forever." Amy felt tears sting her eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," Nathan said softly, "but sometimes love isn't enough." With one final, lingering glance, Ty turned and walked away, each step heavy with the weight of his return and the unspoken promises hanging in the air. Amy stood frozen, the world around her spinning. Torn between two lives, two men, and a past that refused to stay buried, she felt the burden of every choice she had yet to make. The quiet ache in her chest was the only thing she could rely on now. Inside the house, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Jack sat at the kitchen table, his weathered hands folded in front of him, his gaze unwavering as he watched Ty move around the room. Ty poured himself a cup of coffee, the sound of the liquid filling the cup, the only noise in the otherwise still space. The silence between them spoke volumes, 1,000 unspoken words hanging in the air, as heavy and palpable as the dust settling outside. It was a moment of reckoning, a pause before the storm of emotions would inevitably crash. And then, breaking the silence, Ty finally spoke. His voice was low, almost tentative, as he said, "Thanks for watching." Amy's heart swelled as she turned to the camera, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you all for being here with us today, for following this journey, for feeling these moments with us, and for your unwavering support. Stay tuned for more, because the story is far from over. You're a part of it just as much as the characters we love." She paused for a beat, her voice thick with emotion. "Until next time, thank you."